University's U.S. Asia Center for Tourism and Hospitality Research. Today we'll discuss how human resource management, along with the hospitality and tourism industry, has sparked some not so positive conversations with COVID in the recent months. However, we do want to discuss how this is an opportunity for HRM to provide innovative and novel solutions for the industry, and how the new employee and labor demands are calling for more solutions as well. So while the landscape for the stakeholders, organizations, employers, and employees has changed, we're hoping to provide some HRM solutions to help the industry balance taking care of both our customers and our employees. My name is Lindsey Lee, and I'm joined today by a distinguished panel of professors and researchers. We have Dr. Juan Madera from the University of Houston, whose research focuses on diversity and inclusion management in the workplace. We also have Dr. Tracey from Cornell University, whose research concentrates on factors that influence the effectiveness of HR systems and the HR implications of legal compliance. And last but not least, we have Dr. Osman from East Mediterranean University, whose research interests are in the areas of service marketing and management, internal marketing, and strategic management. So we'll start the discussion with each of our professors providing their expertise and their perspectives before addressing the questions that were posed during the registration. And we also have a Q&A chat available for the audience to be able to post questions. So if you have any questions, please be sure to throw those in the chat and we can address them towards the end of the webinar. And without further ado, if anybody would like to start, I believe there was a rock, paper, scissors game, and I think Dr. Madera is going to go first.
That's fine. So thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. So I want to start off with obviously the bright side. And so the pandemic has put a spotlight on the health of workers, right? So I think that the policies around calling in sick will have to change. So at least here in the United States, we have a culture of working while sick, right? Whether it's a simple, common cold or a flu or stomach ache. America, has a culture of where workers feel pressure to work and not call in sick. And this will have to change. And I think because of COVID, it's put a spotlight on the health of workers. And I think that is where there will be an area for positive change. Post-COVID, I don't think employees will want to work with others who look sick. If they feel sick, I don't think they want to come in. And more importantly, customers are not going to want to be served by employees who are coughing or sniffling or look sick, right? And so I think on the bright side, I think HR policies around calling in sick will be more progressive, protecting the employees' rights to, not come into work when they feel sick for their own safety and for the safety of customers and employees as well. And so I think that will change. Recently I've read this article about COVID and hospitality, particularly the hotel industry side from Forbes magazine. And I thought this was the great quote. They said that, the hospitality industry is now required to show theatrical displays of cleanliness, right? That we're clean, it's safe, right? I mean, even recently, the Board of Tourism in Portugal, their new motto is open and safe, right? Or safe and clean. I think that's what it is, right? And so it's this theatrical displays of cleanliness because they know that customers right now are expecting and that you are clean and safe. And I think that expectation is going to continue post-COVID-19, which I hope is soon.
I'll jump in and compliment that one. I concur a lot of what I heard early on, and then what I continue to hear through this sort of stakeholder lens continues to focus on the employee side and health and well-being, especially mental health for survivors is a big deal, and how to stay connected with those also that you may have had to furlough over the past several months. So there's a lot of real emphasis on making sure that teams are feeling the love and really engaging with them in the ways that really keep them as balanced as possible, even though they're being stretched in a lot of really, really tough ways. I also think that we're seeing some emphasis on efficiency which while, you know, a lot of firms have had to, you know, retrench their efforts and scale back significantly, what it does do is, you know, like, you know, these kinds of situations, you know, create an opportunity for you to be a little bit more innovative. And so consequently, when firms, for example, have you know, an IT initiative that they're pursuing currently, well, this just gives them a lot more license to keep doing so, because in theory, they've already got it budgeted. So that's not going to necessarily, although it could be scaled back because of some of the reductions in the ability to pay for some of these efforts. But it does provide then with some opportunities when you think about then tying it into clean issues and contact lists and all those other things that really come from those applications. Another thing that's also popping up here is as a result, it's again forcing hand to be more flexible in ways to promote adaptability. And knowing full well that there still remains a great deal of ambiguity about what's going on out there, ways of mining information, both that which is historical, and then looking at ways to look at it differently in forecasting, maybe so that you can give yourself a little bit more insight on where those new revenue streams or customer bases are going to come from, or what are the kinds of things that employees are going to really need over the long haul if you're going to try to develop skill to adapt to new technologies that are being introduced in the workforce to accommodate some of these kinds of, you know, issues that, you know, either have to do with social distancing or regulations that are being set up by governments to really require you to operate differently. So there's a myriad of kind of interesting things. And I think my optimism comes from those firms that had set themselves up really well from the very beginning. They had great cultures, right? They didn't have to worry so much about what their identity was. They had strong kind of understanding and shared understanding about what was really important. So they weren't working on culture when this hit. Those that did are part of those that are really probably struggling right now. And we all know what ugliness that looks like. And so consequently, those firms that had that baked in at the beginning of this process are now being able to not just, okay, figure out the steady state, whatever that may be, survival mode, but even finding and inching their way toward maybe more innovative kinds of options. And I see many examples of that in firms that I'm working with and through research. So that's my initial observation.
Yes, in addition to what Bruce has said, mental health, employees are suffering from mental health problems. As a quick response to the COVID-19 pandemic, a number of hotel chains and independently or family-owned hotels implemented retrenchment and divestiture strategy. And this gave rise to loss of manifest and latent benefits among employees. And the remaining ones, they had high levels of job insecurity, unfavorable perceptions of job security in the organization, and they were faced with high levels of job intention, and we can say they lost organizational trust. They didn't trust the organization because they thought that talented employees would be retained by management of the organization. Let me share the findings of my short interviews conducted with two hotel general managers in Northern Cyprus and Turkey. They said their employees really suffer from anxiety and mental health problems and do not feel comfortable at work. Although they work in a safe hotel, which was able to receive global security accreditation, which uses UV light disinfectant and conducts temperature tests for everyone. So they do not feel comfortable at work. They are scared. Some of the employees left the industry, and some of them said, this is the original sentence I got from the general manager, instead of suffering from the threat of job loss in the hospitality industry, we now prefer to be one of the members of the security personnel in a shopping mall. Okay, job insecurity is still a problem in our hospitality and tourism industry. The COVID-19 pandemic has heightened it. So despite the presence of a bailout package, employees are really bored of current situation, increasing their anxiety, and they feel imprisoned. Okay, the governments are supporting the salary payments of the organization. For example, in Turkey, it is, if I'm not mistaken, it is 60% of the salaries are paid by the government. In the United Kingdom, it is about 80% or up to 2,500 pounds. They are also talking about some, maybe during the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, they were unable to have a full control over their employees. But one thing they understood, they made a mistake with talent management.
I think there were some great points brought up, and I really liked how we're all caring for our employees because they're also suffering through all of this as well. There were some questions that were related to our employees that were posed. So one question that was asked was, do you think the massive layoffs is unavoidable for the industry, and is it the right thing to do? Are there alternatives? And kind of touching on some of the points, is there a way we can bring the trust back with our employees? How do we make them feel more secure in their roles as our employees? I'm not sure who would like to tackle this very difficult question.
I'll jump on this one. I mean, it's not a matter of choice. I mean, it is, but you have to. I mean, so many firms, they didn't have a choice but to furlough and let people off. Otherwise, they would have no future. And many, even if they did that, even when they did that, they are no longer here. And we're going to continue to see, companies going under and the financial institutions taking these things over until you can figure out how this is going to settle out economically. The firms that, again, did this, set this up in ways where they were honest and transparent with their employees about the process. And they also did some other things to try to build community around that. So they were kind of public in their efforts, and you saw some pretty interesting efforts on the part of CEOs of some of the famous hotel companies that we all know and love, get out there in front and say, hey, this is not just about, our companies or, the money that we're going to, lose, but it's about the communities that are going to be impacted by this. So I was really heartened by some of the messaging, by some of the senior people that were saying, look, the industry is going to come back. There's no question about it. The question is, how can we take this perception that's kind of pervaded, and we've all been kind of silent about it. And my view has been, the hospitality industry continues to be kind of a stepping stone to something else in many places. It's not a go-to place as an occupation. It doesn't have that same kind of prestige as some other places of work or types of occupational pursuit. So as a result, when we see this kind of broad-minded, purposeful, altruistic, take care of you kind of effort on an industry level, it shows people that the industry really is much more about maximizing somebody's wealth, but it's about taking care of and really showing about ourselves in a very humanistic way. That to me draws people into a much more, I think, purposeful and intentional kind of opportunity, if you want to talk about it from a career standpoint, and makes it a more appealing kind of place rather than sort of, well, maybe I'll go and bide my time in restaurants or work at the desk and then go find something else that's a little bit more lucrative or sexy or whatever you want to call it. So I do think that if the industry responds in these right ways, and because it is going to come back, we know it, we're all pent up, and we just have to figure out what those navigational kinds of requirements are going to be once this, the restrictions will become lifted and vaccines are available and all those kinds of things, so that we will then be able to pick up and see where that demand goes, and then what the kind of business models, especially around that human touch side, and the ways in which people react and respond to that. And I think we're really going to see some really nice welcoming of that and really some really a great embrace of the industry. And that really bodes, I think, very well from a variety of perspectives.
I think that's a really great point. It was really, I'm sorry, there's somebody at my door. Of course, it would happen during the webinar. But it was very encouraging to see a lot of the companies being able to put out messaging that they care about their employees and trying to take ownership of what's happening. But there were some other good questions that were raised in our chat. It looks like we have some questions about the future of hospitality in relation to recruitment and taking hospitality as a career, as well as how these job losses of the industry are going to affect the career optimism of our current students and our future graduates.
Yeah, so go ahead, Osman.
Okay, sorry. Yes, please.
Oh,
Yes,
sure.
yes, Madera, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. and again, looking at the bright side, right? So we know that the pandemic has put a negative spotlight on the vulnerability of the hospitality industry, but on the bright side, we know that employers who are going to need to attract employees back, especially those companies that had massive furloughs, are going to have to make themselves more attractive, right? And so that means that they're going to have to work on providing more progressive HR policies, whatever that looks like, whether it's a better pay structure or flex time or flex work or telecommuting, which is not common in the industry. But research shows that there's so many positive aspects of these type where it could be done. There's a lot of positive outcomes for employees. And so again, the hospitality industry is going to have to compete to keep their talent and then attract talent once we open up again. And I think that again will require them to be more attractive, right? And so again, how are they going to attract employees? They have to provide more progressive HR policies for these employees. And then on top of that, the other thing what's interesting is that colleagues and I have some data looking at the anxiety that both furloughed employees have of the hospitality industry and those who are currently employed have, right? And so those who are currently employed have a lot of anxiety, and it's tied more to the safety side, both from a health perspective, but also keeping their job, right? And those who are furloughed, their anxiety is whether they should remain in the industry or start looking outside the industry, right? And that's where, again, the hospitality industry has to do something to keep those people, right? Because otherwise, we're going to lose a lot of great talent.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your answers. There was another chat or question posted in the chat asking, with a lot of our employees performing the duties of 2 or 3 positions due to these layoffs, what do you believe is the best thing companies can do right now to help retain our current employees once jobs start to reopen again?
Let me contribute to this. A number of managers lost their jobs in the hospitality industry. They were furloughed. The ones who stayed in the organization, they had an increase in the number of subordinates to be supervised by them. So there was an increase in the span of control. Under these conditions, the successful ones were able to manage the whole process successfully. That is related to the issue of selective staffing and fair performance appraisal system. If you really hire the candidates whose values and beliefs fit those of the organization or whose qualifications fit the requirements of the job, you hire right person for the right job. And when you invest in these people, in these individuals using, for example, high performance work systems, okay, those people are going to be promoted to higher levels. When they are becoming successful managers or supervisors, they will be able to manage more employees during these difficult times. Therefore, we are investing in our employees. Therefore, we are investing in our managerial staff. But if you have nepotism, if you have favoritism in your organization, you are not going to promote the right person in the right position, and this is going to create additional problems for your organization, and it's not going to be possible for you to manage so many people during these difficult times. Okay.
I want to add something else to that. I think Osman's hitting on some really good points there. Judy, I think your question is a good one. I think another thing that firms can do to help their employees survive when they're being asked to do a heck of a lot is figure out how to automate a lot of their transactional work that doesn't add any value. So when you go back then to, as I mentioned earlier, when firms have, taken the path of ensuring that they've got, better systems in place to, have contactless check-in or check-out or any of your point of sale transactions or even back office stuff, especially in the HR world. there's so much of that can be solved through pretty decent workforce management tools. And just adopting a number of those can help free those individual bodies from that administrative milieu and get them to focus on more value adding, either revenue contributing or cost saving kinds of activity. And that's going to help them, really, do their jobs more effectively and contribute, so that as demand does pick up, as Osman said, we can figure out how we can deploy folks either laterally or vertically through the organization based on capabilities and other kinds of things that we know about them.
Let me add one more thing. The intensification of work in the organization has required the utilization of multitask skills. So this shows that organizations are in need of successful people, like polychronic employees, maybe employees high on psychological capital, which includes resilience.
These are all really great points, and we have some more questions that were posed in the chat. Dr. Madera actually got a shout out. Are minority employees affected more adversely than others? When resources are scarce, there is more vulnerability for the traditionally disadvantaged. So anybody is welcome to chime in, but Dr. Madera got a shout out for that question.
Sure, yes, and unfortunately, the answer is yes. And so looking at some of the data out there, it's ethnic minority, frontline employees, minimum wage employees who are the ones who are more likely to lose their jobs. They're more likely to work for independent restaurants or independent kind of businesses that are not part of the big chain, that have less resources, that have less flexibility, that have the less resources to switch from, delivery and, those types of models where you can keep people employed. And unfortunately, it has negatively affected women and minorities who, again, are more likely to have the frontline positions. I should have a solution, but I still have to think about it.
No bright side comments, no happy thoughts.
I got to think about that one. Sorry.
There is some.
What I am seeing though, and this is tied again, it's not directly from pandemic, but two themes in my mind have emerged out as very salient strategic issues, and it is tied to this notion of individuals who are underrepresented, especially if you go up the hierarchy in many firms. Is looking at the notion of social justice and how that's playing out in terms of the attention that diversity, equity, and inclusion issues are playing in decision making. And so a lot of conversation early on was certainly, not only retrenchment, but doing so in a manner that was legally compliant. So there was that part of it. But then on the other side, if again, you're looking at it through this lens, making sure now we're looking the way we should look, and we're represented in the ways that we should be represented. And this gives it time for us to pause as an industry and make sure that the diversity that we see all around us is truly reflected in the right ways. And that's I'm seeing a priority going into this next year of making sure that DE&I issues are right on the front of the table.
Thank you. That's perfect. I mean, that's a nice positive. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I've never been asked so many questions about diversity and inclusion until this moment. Like, this year has been the year where diversity and inclusion has really mattered. And again, it reflects the social justice issues that's happening in our current environment, at least in the United States. And so, yeah, that's the bright side, right? That people are now paying attention to this. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's put a spotlight on a lot of these issues that were existing in our organizations, but it's also given the opportunity to restructure and take a look at how we're operating and see how we can make things better for the future.
How about this for an idea? How about we use our industry change as a lever for social change, right? If you think about it, we are a powerful force in a society that is very diverse, and we kind of have that look, that feel of being inclusive and representative. And if we're doing some role modeling and providing best practice examples of how to do this, then we're going to be go-to in that regard. And I think we will be a vanguard for others to consider when they're looking at how to do this right. And that's one of my maybe grandiose, but really high expectations, that we will learn something from this and be able to do something very, no more than symbolic about it, but really impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. Ooh, excuse me. Absolutely. It looks like we're getting a lot of questions regarding our students and the future for our students. So one question that was posed asks about sharing some suggestions to our current students to make them feel more secure with the future of our industry. And do you think gaining international experiences would still be essential for our future talent to look for jobs as the industry is coming back and the domestic markets would be a main driver? That was a very long question. I can rephrase it again.
I'm trying to find the question.
Well, does it, I mean, to go work internationally, you virtual work in anytime, anywhere. But if you want to be there, it's really going to be contingent on travel restrictions, right? If you're in the U.S., you know, we're not going anywhere anytime soon, right? So that's one of the realities. So as I mentioned, I posted just, you know, be flexible, be positive, and be flexible. And I think about non-traditional options. And what I've been telling, for example, my students this semester, in preparation for who knows what's going to happen next summer as an internship opportunity. Hey, you've got some time over the winter break between the semesters. Why not go out and do some kind of informational externship or something that's, you know, maybe just a little bit of a get to know you with somebody or some company or some market that you'd like to know a little bit more about. Just, you know, just to kind of give you something that you can use as a process for start prospecting for potential opportunities that will arise as demand does increase. I'm not sure one of the questions was around 2025. Is that when we expect it? Now, I think even the folks who are really skeptical about the future would not say that it's that bleak. But I do think certainly 2021 is going to be austere, no question about it. And so you have to think a little bit about getting a creative kind of streak to you, and maybe, you know, thinking about venturing outside what you would normally think is a traditional approach to your job search process. So that's why I encourage you, and that really depends on what you're interested in doing.
Absolutely. I think these are great points, especially this idea of being innovative and creative. And again, we can't travel very far. So there's going to be this emphasis on domestic travel, and the idea of diversifying in different ways your resume, I think is a really good suggestion to all of our students and future graduates. I'm trying to go through some of our other questions. We have a lot of questions regarding our students and the future of our industry. But what do you personally see as the most important HR issue that would need to be addressed once the pandemic is over? I know we've talked some things about employees, our employee well-being, and this idea of calling out and having this freedom to call in sick. But in your opinions, what do you think is the most important HR issue that will need to be addressed once we can all be free and travel again?
Let me contribute to this. Firstly, organizations are really devoid of a roadmap, which is strategic plan. First, they must have strategic plan, and they have to understand the expectations of these individuals, potential individuals who are going to be working for the organization, and they have to attract the talent to the organization using career opportunities, okay? If not, those organizations which have already lost a number of talented employees during the COVID-19 pandemic would not be able to attract these people to the company. It's not going to be possible. Therefore, in my opinion, career opportunities seem to be one of the most important high performance work systems in the tourism and hospitality industry. And also we are in need of individuals who are going to be high on career resilience, because those people are expected to be ready to adapt to difficult situations, willing to take risks and contribute to the organization during these difficult times. So the COVID-19 pandemic but is a learning movement for all of the hospitality companies and the operators in the competitive market environment.
I'll jump in. Thanks, Osman. I do agree with you around, you know, having a reasonably cogent and crystallized view of where you're going and supporting that through appropriate structures and policies. One of the things where I think we can really lever some opportunities is on the design of work. My feeling is that a lot of the work that people do in our industry is so bloody narrow and so bloody, kind of just doesn't really connect in with other, more enriching kinds of things. And this leads to, this broader notion of professionalizing work opportunities. And that, you bake in then a much more flexible kind of work environment that says if Bruce comes to the table and wants to, not only serve tables, but I've also got maybe some ability to be creative and maybe work on our social media platform. Cool. So why don't we take advantage of that? So rather than trying to, stick with what we have done, tried and true over the course of time, let's get, all stakeholders, including unions, to kind of bite this notion of being a little bit more broad-minded about the kind of work we're asking people to do. So it's a lot more interesting, both intellectually, and it's also got more emotive connections where you can really feel this is very, important work that we're doing here. And it's not, as I said, so narrowly construed. And I think there's a lot of really good opportunity there to make work much more attractive in our industry by just looking at how we design it.
Absolutely. Dr. Madera, did you want to chime in on this question? If not, I've got it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. It's going to be all about flexibility in how work is structured and how the work is designed. And I agree with Bruce that, we've been very narrow about like, this is the job description and you only do X, Y, and Z, and that's all you do, right? And so that's not going to attract talent, right? I mean, what's going to attract talent are these positions that are more flexible, where you can be more creative, you could be more innovative, where you can gain skills in other areas. And so that, I think that's going to be key for the hospitality industry. And then also flexibility. Oh yeah, go ahead.
And to Osman's point, just to piggyback on exactly what you said and reinforce it even further, go back to what Osman said earlier about if you also have a plan as a company, though, you're going to have a plan for those employees, and those employees are going to see where you're going to be able to go and where they're going to go with you. And that to me is a really powerful way of giving people, a reason to come work for us. That's very compelling. That's more than just a golden opportunity now. Oh, I can see how this is going to play out over time. That's a lot more sellable.
Yeah,
that's a great
totally
point.
Agree.
That's a good point, Juan.
Absolutely. I think the silver lining in all of this is the beauty of why we love the hospitality and tourism industry is always going to be there. With customer service, being able to do our best is still going to be there. But this idea that now we can be innovative, be more flexible, have more creativity in these job roles, I think it's going to be really something that's attractive to a lot of employees that are going to want to stay with our industry. We got another question in the chat for both men and women, but more so for women. A huge challenge to exceeding in the hotel industry is the long hours, working weekends and holidays, and frequently moving from hotel to hotel, making family a second priority. Do you see any changes in that? Should we expect any changes? What are your thoughts and opinions on that?
I've seen some I'm going to jump in this one because I've seen a lot of really tied back to this notion of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Significant focus on women in leadership. Companies like Four Seasons are taking this sucker right by the horns and saying, we have to figure this out. And what they're doing is, instead of starting at sort of a corporate-based model, where it tends to be more of a one-size-fits-all, they're letting it become more of a grassroots kind of initiative. So, for example, they take advantage of some of their really excellent, folks in the field who are banner wavers for this topic, and they organize very kinds of customizable programming that allow these individuals who have to make decisions about how mobile can I be if I've got kids in school right now, if I've got an opportunity to take a promotion and go to another market. Help me figure this out. So there's a lot of that kind of decision making that is being looked at in terms of how to best serve the company and the individuals that you have in your employ. And this has become very topical, and it will continue to be so, as I mentioned, because if we're really going to be preferred in the employment schemes, we've got to make sure we do a better job in this domain for sure. I'm interested also here, Juan, I know this is an area that you do look at in terms of how firms, develop policies around this. What are you seeing in terms of progressive thinking?
Yeah, so, one of the challenges is, will come down to, again, structuring the work that's more favorable to women, especially for working mothers. It's other industries have adopted more flexible type of scheduling, work schedules and hours. Um, that's something that could be adopted by the industry. Again, it's been very narrow thinking, and I think that because so many people have been forced to work from home, or to change their hours, that they've seen that you can still do a lot of work from home, or working your non-traditional hours for the hospitality industry, and restructuring some jobs where there is more flexibility, and that will benefit women definitely, and working mothers who, who are primarily the caretakers, right? So women, regardless of if they're single mothers or they're married, they are, numerically, they are more likely to be the caretaker of children and responsible for everything, right? If a child gets called, is sick at school and someone needs to go pick them up, it's usually going to be the mother who takes care of the child. And so, again, restructuring schedules and the work design to be more flexible and to be more family work friendly will benefit women. And I think it will attract and make it more attractive for women. I've had, women tell me that at some point they stopped, their career, in the management side, because they wanted to be mothers, or they were thinking about parenthood, and so they changed the trajectory, and they no longer wanted to be promoted into certain management positions because they knew that was going to take away from their family time. And so, again, we're looking forward. I think this is where the hospitality industry can be competitive, is to provide, again, a more flexible, family-friendly type of environment.
Let me contribute to this. Work from home has led to the increased use of technology and techno stress among especially salespeople during the COVID-19 pandemic. So employees who are married with or without children or live with others face a number of challenges. For example, employees may be faced with unique forms of work-life conflict and high levels of social exclusion and loneliness. These are critical issues we have to take into consideration. Techno stress and these challenges may have mitigated these people's productivity and creativity. Therefore, emergent changes in our work practices or in the industry's work practices can be shared with employees, family members, or partners to seek their support, and this highlights the need for family social support.
Absolutely. We had a question that also addresses this work-life balance question, but are there any suggestions that we can provide for the industry as to how they can design or implement family-friendly policies within their HR systems?
Incentives. Yeah, absolutely. So just like you can give an incentive to your employees to go see their doctor to, on a regular basis. So in addition, I'm going to pay in the United States, as you know, somewhere between 80 and 95% of the total healthcare premium. Okay. So every time you go, you're going to pay whatever it is, $20. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it worth your while. I'm going to give you $100 a year to go see your primary care physician. So I'm going to cover the cost of your out of pocket for that visit. And the more that I do, I'm going to prevent catastrophic claims. I'm going to get to the get small issues before they get to be big issues. And that reduces my exposure, my claims, and therefore people are not going out of work as often. They're more productive and they're more engaged. Okay. We can do the same kind of thing with family friendly, right? We can create incentives so that, men and women do in fact take leave, that there's no discouragement or chill effect when you do take the leave. There's a whole host of things that you can do to really make it much more palatable, much more impactful, just by throwing an accountability and incentive structure around it. It's pretty darn simple. I had the former CHRO of Lowe's Hotels, Alan Momire, talking about this very thing in my class of grad students yesterday morning. And it's a really very direct and easy way to push some buttons to make sure you get people to behave in more healthy or more productive ways. It's really pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and related to that is, again, this might be an American, although research shows that it's also found in other countries, but we need to get rid of this idea of FaceTime, right? So the pressures of being there, even on your off days, right? That managers in the hospitality industry, even on their vacation days, they have their phone and they're checking in because no one knows how to solve anything without them, right? And so they feel the pressure. So they're working while supposedly spending time with their family. That is counterproductive, right? And so having incentives where you promote the idea that it's okay to take time off and to spend time with family, and that you will be expected not to check in. Maybe it should be the opposite, right? Where if you call in on your vacation time, we're going to deduct a vacation day. Yeah, exactly. And so we reverse the incentives. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Let me add something to this discussion. We made so many studies on work-family conflict and work-family facilitation, especially in developing countries in different regions: Nigeria, Cameroon, Turkey, Northern Cyprus, Albania, Iran, Jordan. What we have seen based on the findings of our study, these are acknowledged among practitioners. However, their successful implementation is really rare in the industry. They know they have to do it, but implementation is a big question, especially regarding the establishment and maintenance of a supportive family work environment, of course, which includes family-friendly programs.
No, you're right. And I think, Osman, you're talking about a really good research opportunity for all the scholars that are listening. I think there's a lot of fertile ground there. And I think you're absolutely right. Looking at programmatic elements, structural elements, and even strategic elements that fit into this notion of trying to create better balance is absolutely needed, because we don't know. I mean, the literature, as you know better than I do, is all over the place. So there's a really lot of interesting, as I said, holes of opportunity there to explore.
Thank you so much for all of your answers. There's a similar question that was asked about how HRM hasn't been truly implemented in its right essence. So how can we motivate and help management yield the benefits from HRM? How can we implement these new family friendly policies, even the employee well-being policies, so that we can truly see HRM be what it's supposed to be for our industry?
May I? Yeah, actually, it is directly related to the question. I want to highlight one thing. We have been focusing on work-life, the importance of work-life balance issues, but I have to underscore the need for work-health balance. Okay, so we are creating an environment where there is a long-hour culture. Okay, there are excessive job demands. We expect our employees to work for at least 16 or 18 hours. Promotional opportunities, career opportunities are so related. We do not provide, we do not create an environment where there is a supportive, where there are family-friendly programs, etc., and benefits, etc. But we want high levels of performance from these people, okay? So what about their health? We do not consider this. Are they really happy with these? What about their families? When, for example, one of the employees spends for 16 hours in a hotel operation, what about his wife thinking about this? What about the health issues? So we have to create an environment where these people can balance between their work and health issues. They have to eat well. You have to take care of them. Okay? You have to make sure that these people really have a good rest, but we don't consider these issues. So then we are going to make these unhealthy people work for our organization. Then we will say these are talented individuals in our organization. No, this doesn't work out as expected. So to cut a long story short, I wanted to highlight the importance of work-health balance in our hospitality operations.
Absolutely. I think you made a really good point of how we're driving our talent to the point of burnout. I remember when I was working, some of my fellow employees would take, a 4-hour nap in their car before the next shift, because you're right, they are working 16, 18 hours a day, and they are very talented, but they can't shine and be the best employee that they can be working off of 4 hours of sleep in your car. So I think that's also a very good point. I wanted to switch gears a little bit. There was a question posed asking, I teach foundations of tourism, and I cover various components for tourism phenomenon. Are there any recommended topics that should be covered, or what should be included that is not included? What are some suggestions of how to teach this foundations of tourism course? I think COVID is just probably the main thing that a lot of people are talking about right now, as well as a lot of the topics that we've covered.
I think here's one suggestion. I just sort of thought of this off the cuff, and I'm not sure how much validity it has, so take it with maybe a grain of salt. But one of the things I'm seeing is when you're teaching a subject like that, one of the angles you can take is on demand in the different segments of the tourism, domain. And it might be interesting in light of current conditions to look at which of those segments, for example, may be most vulnerable, which may be rebounding more quickly. Where are some of those segments that are maybe even, wow, I didn't even think about that one, but boy, is it sure got some, great potential long-term or whatever. So I'm thinking about things like when you get into new customer constructs, when you look at segments around darker paranormal tourism and the notions of enchantment. Right. And is that going to be a kind of a cool idea? I don't know. Maybe it will, but there's going to be some, I think, interesting discovery that you can find when you go into a kind of a slice and dice of what does the tourism, market domain and, the different stakeholders that play in that space do. And again, looking at it in terms of different elements of that space and their relative, maybe vulnerabilities or, strength in terms of how they're able to weather these kinds of environmental shocks. Good question. Sorry, I probably wasn't very helpful.
No, absolutely. These are great suggestions. We're getting a new round of questions. So there was a question that was asked. It seems that the primary goal of HR departments is to make sure the executive team doesn't go to jail or get sued. In other words, legal compliances are at the top priority. So how can the HR department balance the legal responsibilities with HRM? Should legal compliances be separate from HR? How are we able to maintain this balance of not going to jail and not getting sued while taking care of our employees?
Okay, so I like this topic. The law tells you what you can do. HR tells you what you should do, right? So there is a compliance requirement there for sure. That's sine qua non. You have to do that. And if you do that, by the way, most of the time you're already baking an effective HR practice anyway, right? So you don't have to worry about compliance as much. It also means you've got enlightened leaders, a strong culture, people who aren't, looking to take advantage, all those good things that you would expect to come in an environment where they do take it seriously. And so if you think about it, that's one way that HR does add value, keeps you out of legal trouble, and it's like an insurance plan. However, the real value comes from how you can invest or spend or allocate those resources in an appropriate fashion. And I like to look at this as making yourself look good on the front end. That is, source and hire the best talent possible. That just makes all your downstream efforts so much easier, right? So if you can really take a good, look at how you're going out there, presenting yourself with a strong employer brand. And this is something that's really important, especially if you're not known. If you're a single, unit operator in a pretty dense market, how do you stand out as an employer? And many of the employers in our industry are of that type. They're not big box giants with big brands that everybody knows. So you have to think about that as a segment that needs to, take into HR. And somebody was asking earlier, how do you structure it? Well, you don't even have a formal function in most of these single unit restaurants or hotels, right? So it's a hat that mostly, is going to be worn by a couple of people, but at least a few folks. And so you have to think a little bit about some of the formality things that you have to do to be compliant, because you can't ignore that. But then also to layer on top of that, the other stuff that I mentioned earlier, that we've been talking about, and Osman and Juan mentioned very directly, about value adding activities that give you more bang for the buck, that create engagement, performance, and all those good things that we care about.
Absolutely. Were there any other suggestions? I do see that there are probably 2 more questions in the chat that we'll have time to address, but any other suggestions or opinions on how we balance preventing going to jail and getting sued and taking care of our employees? If not, I'll just jump right into the questions. There was a question posed: as professors, how are you integrating your perspectives directly with the private sector CEOs who are, which is very male dominated?
I mean, from my own perspective, I mean, I think that there's always a push, and this is probably true for most of academics in this field, is, of course, we're so applied, and we strive to put our research out there, not just in academia, but of course, so that it gets applied. So I try to disseminate some of my research findings in more, popular type of outlets, non-academic journals. Earlier I alluded to the fact that as someone who researches diversity and inclusion, this has been my busiest year ever, because of the political social climate here in the United States. It's become at a forefront, and so I've had the opportunity to again disseminate some of my research and ideas out there. But there's always that balance and struggle of trying to disseminate some information, make it so that it's understandable. But the fact that they're reaching out is amazing, right? I mean, again, that means that they are thinking strategically, that at some point, if it's not already part of their strategy, that they're thinking about D&I issues, work, family, life balance issues.
I also think one of the benefits of being professors is that we have this platform where we can teach the future leaders of the hospitality industry, and hopefully being able to integrate these ideas into the classroom, making our students more aware of these issues. Hopefully in the next few years, when they become the future CEOs and executives of the hospitality industry, they'll be able to implement what we teach in the classroom and be able to make a change in that way. There was also another question. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, let me add one thing to this. This is, in my point of view, this is related to what you teach your children during their early childhood. Okay, so if you say to your child, look, these are your responsibilities. You are supposed to take care of a number of things when you are after you are married. So you are teaching something to your child that these are going to be under your control. These responsibilities are your responsibilities, not your husband's responsibilities. Although you become a manager in the industry, it doesn't matter. You are still responsible for these things. This is related to what you teach your children when they are growing up in the society. Even it is the case in primary schools. It's the case during the educational lives of these children. Look at the developing countries. Things are totally different. You are saying that in the United States, this is male dominated. What about the countries in the Middle East? What about the situation in Turkey? Totally different. Okay, so culture, religion, how you are educating these children, these are the specific variables we have to consider when we focus on that specific topic.
Absolutely. I completely agree with everyone's suggestions. I think we have time for one last question. There was a question posed by one of our attendees who's a junior scholar and interested in abusive supervision. I'm wondering if it will have any legitimacy to protect employees in the future and how maybe we can use HRM practices to safeguard against abusive supervision. Anybody have any insight or suggestions for how we can address abusive supervision?
How big of a deal is it? That's what I'd want to know. Show me how big of a deal it is operationally. And then if it is, what have we learned about it already? Because there's been some research on this topic in not only hospitality contexts, but other types that would be generalizable to anything that we might be interested in looking at. So as any scholar getting a start in a particular domain, be an expert in that domain so you know where the gaps are and then how important those gaps are to fill. Once you've identified that, and you can do that both, as I said, on a conceptual as well as practical level, then you can justify studies all day long, right? So that's part of it. And then what is it about those sort of gaps or, holes in the literature that you're trying to explore? And again, how does it shed new light on that which we already know?
That was perfect. Yeah.
I've been reviewing manuscripts this week.
I know.
And I know both Osman and Juan can relate to that. I don't know if I've tapped you guys yet, but you probably will get an email from me shortly. Sorry about that. I promise I won't abuse you too much.
Well, I just wanted to be mindful of the time, and I wanted to thank our panelists for joining. If there's no more burning questions for the audience, I thank the audience for joining as well. I believe this recording will be available through the US Asia Center's website, and I can follow up in terms of that. But I just wanted to thank all of our panelists again, as well as the audience, for making this a great and lively webinar on the positive side of HRM in lieu of COVID. And thank you all for joining. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your invitation. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for participating.
Bye.
Thank
Good
you.
to see y'all. Take care and all the best.
Okay. Bye.